The Supreme Court has blocked President Biden's workplace vaccine or test requirement, but they're going to keep the mandate in place for some healthcare workers. Brigida Santos joins me now to talk about the details of all that. Brigida, why did the Supreme Court rule against the mandate? What is the underlying argument there?
The High Court's conservative majority says Congress has not specifically given the Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration the power to impose requirements forcing workers to get vaccinated against COVID-19 or submit to weekly tests. Back in September, President Biden directed OSHA to draft the requirement for companies with over 100 employees as an emergency temporary standard that would apply to about 84 million people. OSHA then issued that ETS in September, but it's been challenged in the courts across the country ever since. Now, the SCOTUS opinion states that there are risks associated with the coronavirus in workplaces, just as there are in any place where people gather, but it's not necessarily an occupational hazard in most cases. Now, this ruling opposes the Biden administration's stance that federal law does grant OSHA the authority to protect employees exposed to grave danger from toxic or physically harmful agents. However, the Supreme Court's opinion also says that OSHA can create targeted regulations for certain jobs where the virus poses a special danger due to specific work requirements.
Yeah, the decision was a surprise in a lot of ways because the notion of health, safety, and welfare, they call it the police powers, are so strong. And here you had OSHA saying, look, we have to do this because it's a worker safety issue. So, so the point is they kind of split the baby. What kind of healthcare workers are still going to have to comply with this vaccine requirement, Brigida?
Sure. Even though the High Court says OSHA doesn't have the authority to enforce vaccine or test requirements on businesses, it does agree that federal law grants the Secretary of Health and Human Services the power to require vaccination for healthcare workers at facilities that receive federal funds from Medicare or Medicaid. So that part of the Biden ruling will remain intact and applies to about 10 million healthcare workers.
Don't you think there's really overreaction on this ruling? You know, you start hearing this ridiculous argument, oh, we need a supermajority on the Supreme Court. Every time the Democrats do that, they just play into something that is not, it's not sustainable as a talking point because, look, they're not going to increase the numbers. And yes, the Supreme Court is going to do things that you don't agree with constantly. But that argument, they need to be very careful about making that argument because the American public says, not so sure about that. Can private companies continue imposing vaccine or test requirements for their employees?
It depends, and I'm sure we're going to see more in the courts. Now, the Biden administration claims there's nothing in federal law preventing private companies from imposing their own vaccine requirements, but some state laws may soon ban such mandates. So they would not be able to do that in those cases. Now, since the Supreme Court ruling, some companies have already abandoned their COVID safety policies, while others say they plan to continue enforcement. For example, Citibank will reportedly still fire unvaccinated employees who are not granted legitimate medical or religious exemptions by the end of this month.
Brigida Santos, thank you for joining me, okay?
Thanks, Mike.